Shemel Shai. Yahweh Shemel Shai. Barakatah Yahweh Shai. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh Shai.
The hardest walk leads to the greatest destination. And what's our destination, brothers? The kingdom, man. The arms of Yahushua, man. The scriptures tell us in the Apocrypha, there's a day coming where Yahushua will place crowns upon the heads of the brothers that maintained their faith in him, that believed in him. He shall place crowns upon their heads. Ezra saw that, man. Our great forefather Ezra saw that in the vision. We want to be part of that group, man. We want to be one of those individuals receiving that crown from Yahushua. You know, man, you know how great that is? I couldn't begin to possibly explain that in words. Words can't even explain the joy of that. Okay?
And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away.
And what is our destiny? To be in this truth. To be in this truth and to make it to the end. As it is written, to finish the work. Like Yahushua said, have finished the work. You know? The Apostle Paul said the same thing. Henceforth I know there's a crown of righteousness that is laid up for me. Okay, that is our destiny.
Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs of God, and joint heirs with him. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Kakadash, double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. All right, and what I want to get into today, is going to, transformation of power. All right, lessons in history, just dealing with, the Roman Empire, all right, and how it, was diverse, from the other, empires that came before it, okay, and what Rome, had did better than other empires is that they mask, okay, the corruption and tyranny, of the rulership. Rome really, mastered knowing how to pamper and slave, and make it seem as if the people were in power, okay, and that the people had to say so when it comes to who was governing them, okay, but it was all based in deception, and we see similar things happening today. And I want to put emphasis on Augustus, because he, was real crafty, okay, and consolidating a lot of power, okay, into one man, all right, which he set the precedence for, all right, the following Caesars after him, to be a dictator disguised, okay, as a public official, okay, and we see similarities, under Trump, which we know, all right, Trump, aka Nero 47, is a Caesar coming back. Okay, so when you go into the book of Daniel, all right, get a few precepts. Then I got a video I want to go into, and then I got some things on the chat, all right, to compare to what's happening now. This is Daniel 7:7 says after this, all right, this is in the AMP. It says after this, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, I saw a fourth beast, the Roman Empire. You see the AMP, it hit, on certain precepts. Still gotta be proofread, but it hit. Okay, so this fourth beast, all right, we know is pagan Rome. Okay, what they call Pax Romania. And it says terrible and extremely strong, all right, militarily, economically, politically, okay. And it had huge iron teeth as military, dominant. It devoured and crushed and trampled down what was left with its feet, so all the empires before it, all right, well, Rome will conquer. It would absorb all the empires, that will come before it and made them, would subjugate them, okay, under the Roman government, okay. And it said it was different from all the beasts that came before it, and it had 10 horns, all right, or 10 kings or 10 vassals, so either you was a direct vassal under Rome and you had, sub autonomy, privileges as long as you paid tribute, okay, or you were a territory or province of Rome, all right, that was ruled by a Roman governor, all right, hence Pilate, okay. So when you go into the Roman Empire, I want to get this word here, diverse, okay, because it ruled, all right, differently, okay, than the kingdoms before it, okay. So you go here, this word different or diverse. All right, which is the Hebrew word shana. Okay. And it says to change, to be altered. All right. It says to change, to transform. Okay. To transform. Okay. So they transform, from, what how kingdoms used to run with a monarchy with one head. All right. And, his position, his title, his authority would be transferred to his son. Okay. Would you have, dynasties come from that? Okay. With Rome, they had a different setup. Now within that, all right, we're going to see Augustus transform, a public, supposedly a public office, okay, similar to a king, just under a different banner. Okay, and what we're seeing today, all right, is a transformation from a so-called, all right, democracy to a technocracy. Okay. So we're seeing, similar things being done, all right, by the heads, okay, of this current system, okay, and we're going to go into the craftiness, of pagan Rome, okay. So just history, a lesson from history, you look into these things and you see similarities, you see certain patterns, and this also just show, okay, who's Esau, because every time he comes into power, okay, he can't help himself, but to be extremely ambitious, okay, and corrupt, okay. When you go to Habakkuk 2:4, okay, it says, look at the proud one, all right, and this is speaking of Esau Edom. His soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith in the true power, okay, because this devil, he's just not right, no matter how he try to play it off. Okay, no matter how they try to dress up, these Edomites, Greece and the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire. All right, they were all wicked. It was all the devils. Okay, it was some nastiness. There was always some nastiness involved. Okay, and there was always corruption. Okay, and imbalance, of wealth and an illusion of, of you know, of power amongst the people. It's always, you know, nigga just ain't right. Nigga, he's never just straightforward as a ruler. You know, when you look throughout history, okay, because you can't even matter of fact, when you go here, because it said he is not right. When you go to the word right, let's go here. All right, yep. So you go to this word right or upright. Okay, it's yashar. Okay, yashar in the Hebrew, what does it mean? It says to be right, to be straight, okay, to be upright, to be lawful, to be smooth, okay, to be straightforward, okay, to be straightforward. You see, and this double rulership is always based on deception. He's never straightforward. It never is what it appears to be. Okay, when this nigga's in power. Okay, and just like now, all right, they put Trump, you know, in office behind this rally cry, "Make America Great Again," as if he was going to be the best thing ever for the common people, you know, for the working class. All right, and it's been the straight opposite. Okay, we're seeing a transformation from a so-called democracy to a technocracy, man. Okay, these devils, you know, they're masters at, you know, transforming power, making it look like something when it's something else. Okay, like I said, we're gonna go into, you know, Augustus, all right, and how he did that in Rome. You know, he set, okay, a precedent for future emperors to have dictatorial type authority, okay, within the republic. You see, so let's go. Oh yeah, let's go to it. So yeah, it's about a 10-minute video, you know, and this guy here, he's pretty good because it's a 10-minute clip of like a 3-hour video. Now this guy is like a specialist, Gregory Aldrich. You know, he does shorts and, you know, particular things and little clips and stuff, but it's like a 3-hour video altogether, you know, and he goes into the Roman Empire and he breaks it down. You know, it's one of the most thorough interviews and lectures, you know, something like a lecture dealing with the Roman Empire, you know, but this is like a 10-minute clip and it's dealing mainly with Augustus. All right, so we'll play this. You know, we get some more precepts and compare it to what we see happening today, you know, and say, Lord, will you brothers, all right, and sisters are edified. So let's watch this.
And you have a whole group of people who want to be the next Caesar. So the most obvious is Mark Antony, who is Caesar's right-hand man, his lieutenant. He's a very...
Now he's picking up right after, you know, Civil War. You know, Julius Caesar is killed. Okay. And you have a power vacuum in Rome. Okay, so you have particular men, Mark Antony, one of them. All right, and him and Augustus were allies, you know, until, you know, they both started eliminating, you know, particular people. And it got to the point that they was the only two left, and then, you know, they went at, okay, but even when we go to Mark Antony, he was the one that established Herod, all right, as king over Judea, you know, because under Pompey, all right, of him and Julius Caesar, what they call the first triumphant. But under Pompey, okay, Judea became a tributary to Rome. But it was this guy here, Mark Antony, that set up, okay, the Herodian dynasty. Okay, he legitimized them as kings of Judea. Okay, so let's go into that little history, but let's play this more.
Good general. He's very charismatic. Everybody kind of expects Mark Antony to just become the next Caesar. But there's also another of Caesar's lieutenants, a guy named Lepidus, sort of like Antony, but not quite as great as him. There's the Senate itself, which wants to reassert its power, kind of become the dominant force in Rome again. There's the assassins who killed Caesar, led by Brutus and another guy, Cassius. They now want to seize control. And finally, there's a really weird dark horse candidate to fill this power vacuum, and that's Julius Caesar's grand nephew, who at the time is a 17-year-old kid named Octavian. Who cares? He's nobody, absolutely nobody. But when Caesar's will is opened after his death, so posthumously read, in his will, Caesar posthumously, and this is a little weird, posthumously adopts Octavian as his son. Now, again, who cares? Antony gets the troops, Antony gets the money, the other people get everything. What does Octavian get? He gets to now rename himself Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. Who cares? Well, around the Mediterranean, there's about 12 legions full of hardened soldiers who are just kind of used to following a guy named Gaius Julius Caesar. And even though it's not quite logical, this 18-year-old, he's now 18-year-old kid, inherits an army overnight. So he becomes a player in this game for power. And the next 30, 40 years is going to be those groups all vying with one another. There's another candidate too, Pompey's son. Pompey was Caesar's great rival. He has a couple sons, and one of them, a guy named Sextus Pompey, basically becomes a warlord who seizes control of Sicily, one of the richest provinces, has a whole navy. He's vying to be one of these successors too. So for the next 40 years, it's, as you said, another civil war to see which guy emerges. Is it going to be the Senate? Is it going to be the assassins? Is it going to be Antony? Is it going to be Lepidus? Is it going to be Sextus Pompey? Is it going to be Octavian?
So now looking back at all that history, it just feels like history turns on so many interesting accidents, because Octavian, later renamed Augustus, turned out to be actually, depends how you define good, but a good king / emperor, different than Caesar in terms of humility, at least being able to play, not to piss off everybody. But like, it could have been so many other people. It could that could have been the fall of Rome. So it's a fascinating little turn of history. Maybe Caesar saw something in this individual. It's not an accident that he was in the will.
Yeah, I mean, Caesar clearly did see something in him. And Octavian, I mean, to cut to the end, is the one who emerges from all that as the victor. We can talk about how he does it, but he's the one who sort of ends up in the same position as Caesar. It takes him 30 years, but he defeats all the foes. He's the sole guy. He now faces Caesar's riddle. How do you rule Rome as one guy and not get killed? And Octavian's, what makes him stand out, and what makes him fascinating to me, is he wasn't a good general. In fact, he was a terrible general. He lost almost every battle he commanded. But what he is he's politically savvy, and he's very good at what today we would call manipulation of your public image and propaganda. So he basically defeats Mark Antony partially by waging a propaganda war against him. I mean, Antony starts out as a legitimate rival, and there are two Romans vying for power. At the end of this war, propaganda war, Octavian has managed to portray Antony as a foreign aggressor allied with an enemy king or queen, in this case Cleopatra, and who is an official enemy of the Roman state. And that's all propaganda. So he takes what's a civil war and makes it look like a war against a foreign enemy. And when Octavian becomes the sole ruler, he looks at what Caesar did wrong, and he very carefully avoids the same mistakes. So
you go into Julius Caesar, who declared himself dictator. Caesar had made a lot of enemies in the Senate. He was looked at as the people's champ. The people loved him, and a lot of legions was loyal to him because he kept them at war. All right, and they became rich under Julius. Okay, but Julius was very, straightforward. And he was very, he had a dominating type, authoritarian, type character and posture. And the Senate plotted and killed him, because this nigga's becoming too powerful. Okay. So they, the infamous, stabbing, okay, at the Senate house, okay, when they stabbed him up, Okay, so Augustus, he's like, okay, how can I rule Rome, okay, as one man, but not seem as if I'm becoming too powerful? So he becomes very deceptive, okay, in how, he manipulates the masses of him not wanting power, but the whole time consolidating all this power to himself, and this is what he's getting ready to explain, you know.
The first thing is just how he lives his life. He's very modest. He lives in an ordinary house like other aristocrats. He wears just a plain toga, nothing fancy. He's respectful to the Senate. He treats them with respect. He eats simple foods. I mean, he's someone who cared about the reality of power, not the external trappings. Clearly, there's some rulers who love, I want to dress in fancy clothes. I want to be surrounded by gold, everything. This is what makes me feel good. Octavian's the opposite. He doesn't care about any of that. He wants real power. And then the other thing is, how is he going to rule Rome without looking like a king? And his solution to this is brilliant. He basically pretends to resign from all his public offices. And not pretends, he does. So he holds no official office. But what he does is he manipulates so that the Roman Senate votes him the powers of the key Roman offices, but not the office itself. So the highest office in the Roman state is the consul. Consuls have the power to command armies, do all sorts of things, run meetings of the Senate. Octavian gets voted the powers of a consul. So he can command armies, control meetings of the Senate, do all this, but he's not one of the 2 consuls elected for every year. So he's just kind of floating or drifting off to the side of the Roman government. He gets the power of a tribune, which has all sorts of powers. He can veto anything he wants, but he's not one of the tribunes elected for any one year. So the state, the republic, appears to continue as it always has. Each year they hold the same elections, they elect the same number of people. Notionally, those people are in charge. But floating off to the side, you have this guy Octavian, who has equivalent power not just any one magistrate or official, but to all of them. So at any moment, he can just sort of pop up and say, no, let's not do this. Let's do something else. And he also keeps the army under his personal control.
Isn't this a fascinating story? Like, what do you think is the psychology of Augustus, of Octavian?
Yeah, and he later changed his name to Augustus when he sort of becomes first emperor. And the other thing he does is he hides his power behind all these different names. So, Caesar called himself dictator for life, right? So everybody knew what he was. Octavian, we even have a source that talks about it. He says he wondered what to call himself. Do I call myself king? No, can't do that. Dictator for life? No way. Maybe I'll call myself Romulus. That was the founder of Rome. No, Romulus was a king. And finally, a solution is he takes a bunch of titles they're all ambiguous, and no one of them sounds that impressive, but collectively they are. So, for example, one of the titles he gets is Augustus, which is something tied to Roman religion. Something that is Augustus in Latin has 2 possible meanings. One is someone who is Augustus is very pious. They respect the gods deeply. Well, that sounds nice, doesn't it? Well, on the other hand, an alternative meaning for Augustus is something that is itself divine. So is he just a deeply religious, pious person, or is he himself sacred? There's that ambiguity. He calls himself princeps, which means first citizen. Okay, what the hell does that mean? Am I a citizen just like everybody else, or am I the first citizen, which means I'm superior to all the others? So every title he takes has this weird ambiguity. He calls himself imperator, which is traditionally something that soldiers shout at a victorious general who's won a battle. And now he takes this as a permanent title. So it implies he's a good general. And by the way, it's from imperator that we get the word emperor, an empire. So originally it's a military title, a spontaneous military acclamation.
It's just fascinating that he figured out a way through public image, through branding, to gain power, maintain power, and still pacify the boiling turmoil that led to the civil wars.
Yeah.
Because when you go into Augustus, all right, which his title was Augustus, Emperor Augustus of Caesar. Okay, Emperor, like he said, there will be a war chant after, a general, would be victorious in battle, and his soldiers would say "Imperatus, Imperatus, Imperatus" in the Latin. There's something they would chant. Okay, so he used that and turned it into the title emperor. Okay, and then he took Augustus, which Augustus can mean illustrious. All right, illustrious goes into being, famous for your achievements. Okay, so emperor, okay, which is going into victory. Okay, Augustus goes into illustrious. When Caesar was the famous name, of Julius Caesar. So he had that 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 reputation that came with that name of Caesar. Okay, so he combined all three of them. Okay, and created this office of emperor. Okay, which would set the precedence for future, okay, emperors to have dictatorial like power. Okay, as he was able to take power from each, okay, sector of government, okay, and combined it all into one office. Okay, something that we see similar being done today. Let's play this.
Well, two things I think work in his favor as well. One is he brings peace and stability. So by this point, the Romans have experienced 100 years almost of civil war and chaos. So at that point, your family, maybe you've had family members die in these wars or been proscribed, your property has been confiscated, who knows what. And here's a guy who brings peace and stability and doesn't seem oppressive or cruel or whatever. So you're like, okay, fine. I don't care. Maybe he's killed the Republic, but at least we're not dying in the streets anymore. So that's a big thing he does. And secondly, even though Augustus always seemed kind of sickly, his constitution, he lives forever.
Mhm.
He rules for like 50 years. And by the time he dies, there's no one literally almost left alive who can remember the Republic. So at that point, by the time he dies, this is the only system we know.
That's another just fascinating.
So yeah, I want to just make some comparisons real quick. When you go here to the chat, all right, just kind of sum it up. Need a couple more precepts. Okay. All right. So I asked, did Augustus Caesar implement policy to deceptively give himself more power? All right. Give himself more power and for future Caesar. Said yes. Augustus Caesar, formerly Octavian, implemented a series of policies and constitutional settlements that expanded his real power while maintaining the appearance of restoring the Roman Republic. Okay, restoring the Roman Republic, make America great again. Okay, these measures also laid the political foundation for future emperors. His approach was intentionally subtle and framed a service to the state rather than personal domination, which made the changes more acceptable to Roman elites, okay, and the public. Okay, it says below are the main policies and strategies he used. The restoration of the republic, power disguised as modesty. It says Augustus announced that he was restoring the republic and surrendering extraordinary powers. However, the Senate then immediately granted him imperium over major provinces, the ones with the most most of Rome's army. So he had most of control of the military. He appeared humble, but kept control of nearly all military forces. The arrangement was formally temporarily but renewed repeatedly. He gained the title of Principes, all right, first citizen, implying equality while granting priority, okay, in political life, okay? And it says Augustus did not openly claim dictatorship. Instead, he made himself commander in chief, all right? And the title sounds familiar, huh? Okay, he made himself commander in chief for all the legions in the imperial provinces, established a professional standing army loyal to him, not the Senate. And that's something that you know, we seen happening with ICE. Okay, it's basically a standing army that's loyal to Trump. Okay, to the White House. It says created the Praetorian Guard, an elite force stationed near Rome to enforce his rule. Okay, you can liken it to ICE as well. All right, said this structure permanently shifted military loyalty from the Republic to the Emperor. Okay, and what we're seeing today, all right, is power being transferred from democracy, okay, to Trump. And basically, Trump is a puppet for the elites. Okay, so we're seeing a transformation of power. Okay, from democracy to Trump, and Trump is all right acting on behalf of the elites. Okay, it says accumulations of powers across offices. Augustus held no single this yeah, Augustus held no single, all right, despotic office. Instead, he gathered multiple Republicans' power. So he disguised his power behind other offices. He wouldn't take on all those titles, okay, but he had all those powers. Okay, it said this allowed him to veto laws, made him, all right, uh, sacrosanct, okay, which is untouchable, but he had immunity. As you can see, Trump, he's a felon, okay, that's in office. Okay, it says frame him as a protector, okay, of the people. You see that? Frame him as a protector of the people. Trump is, you know, you look at Trump, he's always protecting you from something. He protecting you from the criminals, the thugs, okay, and your local in your local communities. You know, he's protecting you from the cartels. Now he's protecting you from terrorists abroad and domestic terrorists. Okay, which would justify his okay extremist okay policies and measures and how he's handling things, man. Okay, it says it gave him the highest military authority in provinces he did not formally control. Okay, now let's go here. So I said, I said, is there any similarities happening now with Donald Trump? It said there are some broad historical parallels one can draw between Augustus and modern political figures. All right. It says possible structural similarities very broad. All right. It says claiming to restore, all right, an earlier better political order. It said Augustus said he was restoring the republic while concentrating power. Trump, all right, uses rhetoric about restoring America, make America great again, claiming elites had corrupted the system. Okay, it says tension with established political institutions. It says Augustus presented himself as a protector of the people, okay, against corrupt or ineffective elites, the Senate. Trump presents himself as opposing the establishment, the deep state, or traditional, all right, political norms. Okay, it says building personal loyalty rather than relying on party institutions. Augustus solidified loyalty through patronage, military command, and personal networks. The modern Republic Party has in many ways reorganized around personal loyalty to him, which is Trump. Okay, so you see similarities, and at the end of the day, all right, what we're seeing is a transformation of power disguised, okay, as humility, okay, described as public service, and you know, with people's best interests in mind, okay, and then this people's champ, okay, type you know, figure, okay, but we're watching power being transformed, okay, we're watching power being transferred. Okay, and ultimately it's going to go from a democracy to a technocracy, and Trump is just a bridge. Okay, so let's go here. Let's get a few precepts. All right. Oh, let's get this in the book of Proverbs. Okay, chapter 12 and verse 5. This is in the AMP still. All right, Proverbs 12 and 5. It says the thoughts and purposes, okay, of the consistently righteous are just, honest, and reliable. Okay, and that's the type of rulership that the Heavenly Father is finna establish through His Son Yahushua. Okay, our rulership is going to be consistently righteous, man. Okay, it ain't gonna be no errors of corruption. It ain't gonna be, deception where you're not gonna know who's in power and, government shutdowns. No, man, it's gonna be a consistently righteous and just and honest and reliable government that the Heavenly Father is finna set up. Okay, it says, but the counsels and schemes of the wicked are deceitful, man. Okay, to where you never know who's in power. It's always some type of scheme. You thought this was supposed to help you, now it's hurting you. Okay, you thought they was doing it for this reason, really for that reason. Okay, now you're dependent on him. Now they can use it for leverage. There's always some type of scheme of deception, man. Okay, when this man is in power. Okay, well, it's gonna be the complete opposite. When we're in power. That's why Yahweh Shai, he spoke of that as well, man. You can go to the book of Luke. All right, 22. Okay. Now this was what? Within Rome. All right. And this was like not too long after Augustus, because this is during the time of Tiberius. Okay, who will rule after Augustus. Okay. So this is not too long. Okay, after Augustus. All right, during this time, of the Gospels. Okay. So this is because matter of fact, Augustus was the Caesar. Okay, when Yahweh Shai, all right, was born. Let's just to prove it. This is the book of Luke chapter 2. Okay, and 1 it says, now in those days a decree went out from the emperor, you see, Caesar Augustus, that all the inhabited world, the Roman Empire, should be registered in a census. Okay, and this is during the time of the birth of Yahweh Shai. Okay. So let's go here. Just want to prove that. All right. So by the time you go to here, all right, Yahweh Shai is an adult. All right. So it's Tiberius, that's Caesar now. Okay. So when you go to Luke 22 and 24 says, now a dispute also arose among them as to which of them was regarded to be the greatest. Yahweh said to them, the kings of the Gentiles have absolute power. And this is speaking of the actual heathen. All right. The kings of the Gentiles have absolute power and lord it over them. Okay. He was speaking of the way that the heathens ruled over their people. Okay. And those in authority over them are called benefactors. Okay. Because here it is, these elite, all right, heathens. Okay, the elites amongst these heathens, they will rule the people with absolute power. Okay, and they will always put on, especially amongst the Romans, these Edomites of Rome, they will put on as if everything they did was for the people. That's why they would put on games. Okay, they would have these triumphs, these parades. Okay, they would do these things as if, the elite class, the nobility, okay, was beneficial to the masses, when ultimately the masses benefited the elites. Okay, so Yahweh Shai is saying, look, that's how the heathens rule, the way y'all even thinking. The fact that y'all, debating about who's the greatest, okay, you're missing the mark. Okay. So Yahweh Shai says, look, the kings of the Gentiles have absolute power and lord it over them. Okay. And those in authority over them are called benefactors. But it is not to be this way with you. On the contrary, the one who is the greatest among you must become like the youngest. Okay. And the one who is the leader like the servant. So he's telling them, look, your rulership, okay, is supposed to serve the people. Yes, you're gonna have perks, and it's gonna come with privileges of being a ruler. Okay, well, the rule your office as a ruler is supposed to be beneficial to the people, not destroy them. Okay, you shouldn't want people depending on you for every meal. Okay, just so you can look great. Okay, you shouldn't have to, just go wage war on another nation just to look like a hero to the masses. Okay, but you putting so many people in danger, but for the opportunity to look like a hero, you'll go wage a war. Okay, of greed, with the neighboring people. Like, your rulership should serve the people who you rule. It should benefit the people you rule. Okay, it says you are those. Okay, it says verse 27 says, for who is greater, the one who reclines at the table or the one who serves? It is not the one. I say, is it not the one who reclines at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. So Yahweh Shah was that example of what he was teaching. Since I've been around y'all, yeah, I'm y'all Lord and y'all master, but what have I been doing since I've been here? Serving, teaching, the miracles, you see, feeding people, washing y'all feet, man. Just, hey, I've been serving, Yahweh Shah, I've been serving since I've been here. Even though, I'm the greater, I took on the spirit of a servant, so to be a good leader, a true balance, all right, righteous leader, you have to have a spirit, of a servant. Okay. It says, you are those who have remained and have stood by me in my trials. And just as my father had granted me a kingdom, I grant you the privilege that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on throne judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, and it's gonna be a righteous, balance, okay, rulership, man. And the heathen, they're gonna get it. Esau, he's gonna, just be obliterated their 1,000 years and then done away with. Okay, he's gonna be used as a throwaway slave in the kingdom, and he's gonna be out of there. Okay, but after 1,000 years, the heathens, all right, they will be able to enjoy, the earth, all right, under a righteous rulership. Okay, they won't have the new bodies. Okay, which that's a part of salvation. They won't have that. They won't be part of the covenant. They won't have the laws within them. They're still gonna be subjugated, all right, to our thrones. Okay, our government. Okay, still gonna be tributaries and servants. You see, and it's gonna be in a righteous, honest, okay, and fair, okay, manner. Okay, we're gonna, it's always gonna be a great Gulf fix. We're gonna be always on a whole nother level. Okay, they're not gonna have the access that we have, to the earth. Okay, they're gonna it's gonna be far better, okay, than this current situation. Okay, and Esau's rulership, okay, is going uh is going to create the way Esau is ruling is going to create in the future appreciation for a righteous rulership, under the nation of Israel. Okay, it says this is Wisdom of Solomon chapter 6 verse 24 said, but the multitude of the wise is the welfare of the world, and a wise king is the upholding of his people. Okay, and a wise king is the upholding of his people. So the multitude of the wise is the welfare of the world. Like I say, the heathen, after their 1,000 years, they're going to get to enjoy, All right, because the thing about it, this whole thing about heathens being saved. Look, man, it's an order to this thing. Okay, when you go into salvation, heathens will not partake in it. Okay, they won't have the new bodies. Okay, they won't be delivered from this destruction. Okay, that's to come, the hour of tribulation. They won't be delivered from that. Okay, either they're gonna be deleted or they're gonna go right into captivity. You see, so they're not gonna partake in our salvation. Okay, after 1,000 years of us being in power, okay, they will, okay, get to enjoy the earth more. Okay, and they're gonna benefit from a righteous, all right, rulership in the earth, man. Okay, so that's the point. Just wanted to get into that. Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified. Till next time I say shalom. Kwame Mashallah, Bible Shalom.